we just continue to write about the things that people want to engage around. And I think, food, music, history, those are all somewhat universal languages, right? That they are things that almost everybody is going to be interested in, where you should go get the best fish fry in Milwaukee, or, what should you go do at Summerfest if, you've never gone? What should be on your Milwaukee bucket list? And then just continuing to put out the type of content that people ask us for. I mean, I pay attention to our SEO every single day of how are they ending up on us, and then what also does best on social for us, and how can we continue to build that out.
Welcome back to Over a Pint, the podcast that focuses on the fast-paced world of marketing told through the eyes of industry veterans. Mr. Lingo, that includes our guests as well. There's no theory here. This is real-world practical experience. The crew today is Mr. Kurtl, Vice President of Celtic Advertising. Celtic is a full-service agency located in Milwaukee's historic ward, Third Ward. Myself, Pat McGovern, Director of New Business Development at Acedia, an award-winning digital agency also located here in Milwaukee. Pumped about the show today, man. Pumped about the show today. Joining us is Carolynn Buser. Carolynn is the bomb. She is the COO, Chief Content Officer at OnMilwaukee. OnMilwaukee is an icon here in town. This is an all-digital publication, hyper-focused on the Milwaukee area. Everything there is to do, to see, to be a part of, you'll find all about it here in OnMilwaukee. And they have been doing this. This blew me away, Kurt. They've been doing this for about 25 years. I mean, these are the OG in digital publication.
Has it been that long? Crazy.
It's bananas, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the cool thing, too, is they're more than just an online publication. And in this episode, we are going to find out more about the brand, how they continue to stay relevant, and what it means to be a Chief Content Officer. Carolynn, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Carolynn, we got a little tradition here. It's called Over a Pint for a reason.
Yep.
It's Friday. It's afternoon.
You're
on Over a Pint. What are you having?
I am actually having a pint of Sprecher Orange Dream soda.
Oh, that sounds yummy. That sounds yummy. Cool. Mr. Lingo, what do you got going today?
It is a Friday. Not that we need an excuse on this show, but this afternoon I had this few episodes earlier on. I'm having a Belgian Imperial Stout, the black walnut from Ray's Grain Brewing Company out in Waukesha. Great brewery, good beer. Glad to have you on the show. Cheers.
Cheers.
Today I am knocking back a Hofbrau Octoberfest. A little bit late for Octoberfest, but you know what? I'm going to enjoy it just the same. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Welcome again to the show. Carolynn, this is going to be, we were talking earlier. We were talking, when you and I kind of reconnected, because we got a history with one another way back. I just had a million questions for you, and I can't wait to get started. Why don't you give us the elevator speech? Talk to us about you, about your history. Get people familiar with the Carolynn Buser brand.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I've been with OnMilwaukee just over 12 years. I'm coming up on 13. And I've really worked in a number of different roles here. And, I started out, honestly, on the sales side, which is actually also how I knew Pat in a former life as well. And I moved from sales to social media. And that really kind of came from, I was already helping curate social media. And honestly, I had a voice that really resonated with OnMilwaukee. And I would say before that point, we really hadn't focused on social that long. We probably were also one of the first media brands here in Milwaukee as well that I think really kind of found a social voice for ourselves early on. And so just working in social, you learn how content goes up and down in the stream, what people are reading at any given time, how long are they engaging with it, what things are they clicking through on. And that kind of gives you a really good, sense of what people are going to resonate with, what are they actually going to click on any given day? How do you make content decisions? And so it actually just kind of naturally evolved from, being in sales here, working on a content and ad agency side for OnMilwaukee to moving into that content and social role. And I kind of just morphed into an editorial director and, worked with the editorial team every day. And we have, 4 or 5 full-time writers at any given time. We publish about anywhere from 12 to probably 20 stories a day. We don't cover hard news. And most days I am very thankful that we don't cover hard news. But, dealing in real time with things that are trending or things that people are searching for and trying to find those hot button topics that people will engage with you around. And then that's where it just kind of moved into a chief content role and figuring out how do we continue to grow our content side and social side. And eventually we also launched what I would call content solutions. So that includes paid content for clients. That includes, us putting together social campaigns that are in support of clients. And now technically my title is Chief Operating Officer, but I am still the Chief Content Officer. So I actually also work directly with a sales team and figuring out what those hot button opportunities are for clients as well. So I would say we're probably one of the only media companies here where I would say there's not as much of a separation of state, right? Editorial and sales, they do somewhat go together, and being able to utilize opportunities for a client and tell things in our voice for them has become, I think, as important as boxes and squares that you can buy on OnMilwaukee.
Cool. Hey, so Carolyn, thank you for that. Give us in the audience, give us your take on OnMilwaukee, what this is. I gave a little bit of it, but I just
we
was a
really
30,000.
are I would say we are the place that people come every day trying to figure out where they should go to eat, how they should spend their free time, what bar they should go out to, what tickets they should buy. And then by extension, we also have things like history of Milwaukee, and nostalgia definitely plays a big factor in OnMilwaukee. And, we've been around for 24 years. We've continued to just kind of grow our audience. And in fact, even in the times of COVID in the past year, we grew readership by 20% in 2021. Wow. That comes without us, covering, I would say, COVID the way that mainstream media did. We covered it in a different way, but we still did grow. And I think people come to us more as an influencer than a news source. I hope that doesn't, I look at that as an asset that people, trust us to tell them, hey, this is why you should go try this new place, or this is why you should go try this new Milwaukee product. But on any given day, you can read about, a number of things. Today we have OnMilwaukee Weekend Preview on the site, and that is something that we've been doing for over 15 years. That is probably one of the main ways that somebody will end up on OnMilwaukee through search. They're looking for things to do in Milwaukee, and they end up on that site.
Carolyn, quick question for you. It's interesting when I hear you kind of give the overview and you're talking through this. Sometimes I'm listening to the how, not necessarily the what. So like everything you said is very important, but I was really picking up on your personality, which is very positive. There's a positive vibe to it, and I try to make that comparison then to Milwaukee. And I was kind of looking at, some of the pillars and, moving Milwaukee forward and creative, community connected.
Yeah.
And you can interpret that in a number of different ways. It could be very literal. It could very much be on a day-to-day basis. Everything we do has to be creative. It has to be community driven, and we want to connect. But I also, but then I look at you and I'm like, well, clearly Carolyn's very creative, and I'm sure she's very connected, community driven. I mean, talk a little bit about the brand and those pillars and what it means literally and maybe not so literally, and then obviously how it parlays to the folks that join the team.
For sure. I mean, I would say I'm part of the brand, right, of OnMilwaukee. I would also say each of the writers are, and each of them kind of have their own vibe and tone, right? They each have their own persona and who reads them based on what they write about. If and building out those brands, I feel is as important as continuing to build out the OnMilwaukee brand, right? So like I would say each one of those writers is a pillar of OnMilwaukee. If you want to know about dining in Milwaukee, you're gonna read Lori Frederick on our team. And if you are interested in, history in Milwaukee, you're probably gonna read Urban Spelunking from Bobby Tanzilo. If you watch The Bachelor, then hopefully you're going to listen to Matt Miller, our culture editor. And you can also drink wine with him, by the way, on a Facebook Live every Monday night after The Bachelor gets done, because he needs to vent about it. So, I think building out each of their brands continues to extend on Milwaukee's, right? And I do believe that's as important as continuing to promote ourselves, as we are a place that we want to help the city move forward, and we want to give people the cool things that are happening. We don't want to ignore the problems that we have as a city. And I do think sometimes people may get that perception of Milwaukee of like, well, you don't cover hard news. You don't, I would say we try and do it in a different way, right? Like we wrote about COVID restrictions, but then we launched a series called Cash Mob that said, let's go and help these restaurants one every week on a weekly basis. And how can we actually help versus, I guess, talking about it in a negative way, right? Trying to kind of find that angle. The other thing I think that is really where we've been successful is each one of the key pillars has their own social network, right? And all of those feed up and down Milwaukee, but then we've actually also invested in community events. We've done a number of them on our own, and we actually did just invest in buying part of Swarm Events. And we are going to be launching 4 more big foodie events this year. And I think that's just an extension of, you read us online, you're a part of that community. Why wouldn't you come and want to do something with us in person? And how does that help our partners? How does it help our clients that want to reach that audience? And then selfishly, it continues to build the OnMilwaukee brand.
Let's hang on that for a minute, because I think that's really, really interesting. Let's go deeper in that vein. What you have is an amazing brand, and the fact that you guys have been able to keep this going and grow this, 20% growth, right, is no small task into this day and age. I mean, 24 years, almost 25 years of doing this. So Carolyn, break it down. What's the secret sauce that has kept OnMilwaukee brand relevant, but relevant and growing?
I agree. And I think some of that is we just continue to write about the things that people want to engage around. And I think, food, music, history, those are all somewhat universal languages, right? That they are things that almost everybody is going to be interested in, where you should go get the best fish fry in Milwaukee. Or, what should you go do at Summerfest if, you've never gone? What should be on your Milwaukee bucket list? And then just continuing to put out the type of content that people ask us for. I mean, I pay attention to our SEO every single day of how are they ending up on us, and then what also does best on social for us, and how can we continue to build that out. And I do think that somewhat is, you can directly correlate how we built social brand and back to our traffic on OnMilwaukee, right? Like the more that those platforms are engaged, the more that you're going to continue to see readership goes up. But that also could be a double-edged sword, right? I mean, let's be realistic. Platforms like Facebook, all of that is algorithm. And we are not a big media company, so we don't have a ton of social budget every month that's going behind promoting OnMilwaukee content to it. But I think that we've continued to find ways to continue to grow that, and people do seem to naturally gravitate towards that.
Gotcha.
I'm hearing 2 things, which I like. One is, obviously, as you look towards the future and obviously growth, I'm hearing innovation. You're talking about a lot of the exciting, endeavors and projects and all these things that Milwaukee is getting its hands on, which clearly says innovation moving forward. But, when we talked about, the pandemic, and you were saying, we actually saw an increase of 20%, and getting back to giving people what they want, you would know better, but I think about that, especially during the height of that period, I mean, I know what I wanted. If I wanted hard-hitting news and I wanted to hear all the realities, I can find it. But if I was hungry for food and all the things that make me feel positive,
Yep.
and let's face it, that's what I wanted to find positive in my life. I was in search of it because there was enough other stuff around me. I can see why, probably there was a gravitational pull towards what you were offering because people, they wanted that probably. It was like more than ever, give it to me.
Absolutely. And they wanted to feel like they weren't helpless, right? Because you felt like you were helpless a lot of the time. And honestly, I still, even when I think like, oh, we're coming maybe to a better part of this, we've been here before, but I think people really wanted to feel like they could be a part of helping places and supporting places and a part of the Milwaukee that they know and love being here, after people were allowed back out of their houses. And how could you do that safely? I mean, we also were one of the companies that we stood up early and said we supported a mask mandate. We also did support whatever decisions people made around vaccination, but we believed that we should lead by example and that we should help, Milwaukee get to the other side of this by trying to come together and help places survive. And honestly, if we posted an article about COVID, and really the only ways that we covered COVID were, number one, like here's mask mandate information, here's where you go get vaccinated. Those are really the only ways that we actually covered it as like a hard news topic of more of like a guide of here are resources. But if you posted an article about COVID, honestly, even 3 months ago, 4 months ago, people were not engaging around it. They were just like, nope. I need something else. And I think we provided that something else. And I think it's also hard sometimes for other types of media to do that. But because it was always our voice and because we've always kind of been that leader and here's how you can be a part of something really cool happening in Milwaukee, we were able, I think, to reach people by kind of pulling at those heartstrings. But honestly, it was authentic. It was not BS. This is who OnMilwaukee is at the heart. And that also is why we decided to, continue to look for new opportunities like the on-site events. And, those are ways for us to continue to grow an audience that already comes through OnMilwaukee every single day. And let's be real, the news game is not an easy game. Most clients now, when they come to us, it's not because they just want, rectangles or squares. They want solutions. And the other side, I think that is somewhat, it isn't, we don't broadcast as much as, at one point, about 90% of our business actually came kind of from running the ad agency side of programmatic ads and social ads. And now you can, there are a ton of different vendors that sell programmatic. In fact, every media company out there is doing it. And so we can still absolutely do that. And we can serve all of your ads how you want us to, but how are we going to continue to add the opportunities for a media site like ourselves? Events provide that opportunity. So that's kind of why we decided we're going to invest in that. And that means we'll invest in people. To continue to build those out. And we already have really strong partnerships for a lot of these. We dipped our toe into this a little bit last year with Summerfest. We did the food truck festival on the Summerfest grounds. That was really summer, their first endeavor as well of like a partnership. And it worked really, really well. It was a sold out event. And I can see us continuing to grow out things like that.
So, Carolynn, talk a little bit more about that. You mentioned it a couple times, and this is a new endeavor for you guys. So, like, the thought process is, hey, listen, let's take what we're doing on, in the OnMilwaukee format and kind of extend it out now from a digital to really kind of in the analog world, right?
Yeah.
So that's the idea. But you're investing in, like, give us some more insight into where this is going, what you're thinking about for this.
Yeah, I think we're first of all, we'll invest in more people to be part of, those events that we put on. We already brought on a new VP of marketing and events. Her name is Natalie DiPietro. She came from iHeart, and worked in a really big brand like iHeart, right? She was in the Milwaukee office, but iHeart is definitely a different setup than on Milwaukee. Our staff is probably in the 14 to 18 people range, right? Most people actually think OnMilwaukee is much bigger than that. They think, oh, you guys are one of the top 5 websites in the state. It really is about 15 people on any given day that are putting out, OnMilwaukee, the website, OnMilwaukee, kind of the ad agency side, content solutions, and then events. So we did invest in somebody like Natalie, who I felt she had a lot of experience already in events. And actually, we did an event in partnership with her called Let's Brunch. And that was a sold out event at Glass and Griddle. Now it's not called Glass and Griddle anymore. I'm having a mind blank. But it's up in the brewery district. And that was sold out. So, I already knew what it was like working with her. And I knew I'd have to bring on somebody that could kind of be at the helm of, okay, what are the opportunities for us in large scale events? But really, the opportunity is not only for community to come together, it's also for partners and sponsors that are like, hey, we want to be around this type of scenario or this type of content or that type of audience.
Yep.
That we worked in different ways and bring them into these events and help them, further their goals as well as ours.
Sure. So this is pretty cool. Because you have such a unique position. You're the Chief Content Officer. You're also running operations. Hey, Carolyn, give us a little look behind the curtain. Like, you talked about 15 people, which is a small staff, right? How do you make the sausage? Like, all right, let's start here. You said you're producing between 12 and 20 articles, pieces per day.
Yeah.
Like, talk to us about how do you guys go about this? How do you determine what's going in here? What's not? I'm sure there's news that breaks that's like, hey, we got to cover this now. Give us a sense as to how you guys just go about that. Yeah.
We generally work on Mondays on, okay, here's the lineup of what we think will happen, right? There's always going to be other things. You have a content calendar, that you're working with in general. An example of that is, we're working on bar month now on Milwaukee, which is March, right? So you're kind of figuring out, okay, what are those main things that we want to cover off in March for bar month? What are those topics? Build out those stories and assign them to the writers. Let people start working on that content now. So by the time that we get to March, we have a good feel. But of course, that's always going to change. I would say in any given day, we probably know 5 to 8 stories that are going to run. And then by the end of the day, you're at, 12 to 20. It really just depends. I just got a text from my dining editor now being like, hey, the scoop is ready to go. I have this full story. And that means we're going to publish it. And that might mean that something else that was already written and is ready to go is going to get pushed back till later in the day so that we can figure out. And you want to take advantage of the opportunity. My goal is either you're not always going to be first on a story. And especially, honestly, in the dining world, it's become a lot more competitive because now every media source is also covering a lot of those things. And it didn't used to be that way. Right. So I guess I'm also flattered that the rest of media now realizes, people engage around food. They engage around those types of scoop type stuff. And then you just work backwards of finding that niche of when it's important to be first on something or when it's more important to have the best story, right? And can we go a little bit deeper than other media did? And I think one of the ways that we have continued to grow is by not always taking that moment of this needs to publish right this second so that we can be the first ones out there versus us telling a better story of, hey, this is really the full scope. So sure, clicks are always going to matter on a website. That is ultimately me being able to say, sure, readership was up 20%, in 2021. Yes, that feels really, really good. But I also want it to be quality content that people want to engage around. And I do think engagement is probably the key metric. We can say we've grown, sure, but how do you keep people engaged around the type of content that you have? How long are they spending reading that story? Are they clicking through at the bottom to read another story that's something similar? And I would say that's also one of the reasons why me morphing into, a chief content officer worked really well. You have somebody that's kind of at the helm of social decisions and content decisions, driving kind of both of those things. Whereas I think in a lot of other companies, you'll have multiple teams that are all working on those types of things. So there's good and bad about being kind of small and nimble like we are. And I generally say to clients when we're talking with them, we're small but mighty. Like most people think, OnMilwaukee is this, everybody generally knows who OnMilwaukee is. And I also think because we're always, it's just kind of naturally ingrained in us to know what's going on. It isn't like, Bobby Tanzilo is sitting there looking at every hour at social media to be like, oh, what building should I go do a spelunk on? It is because there's also developers and partners or construction companies that are reaching out to him saying, hey, we have this project going on. We know that you're going to tell the kind of story that most other media isn't going to tell. We'd love for you to tell it. And so then we do in general. And that might open the door to other things with them. It might not.
Yep.
I sometimes still get the question of, the pay for play conversation with media and how does that work? And 95% of content on Milwaukee is not associated with a paid client. Sure, 5% of it does, because we are a media company and we have to figure out how to continue to grow and make money. I also think we're making that now and, putting together social campaigns for clients, putting together a content series maybe. And I don't think that's something that you really see with other local media. If we can say to a partner, all right, we're going to do a series on what we call hidden gems, right? So Miller is our partner on hidden gems, and that really is about like corner taverns, right? And they say to us, well, we want to continue to highlight the taverns and bars in Milwaukee that are part of the fabric of this city. And we say, okay, well, let's put together a series that is highlighting those, that always allows that Miller, who is the client on this, to be associated with those bars or taverns. And not a lot of other local media, I think, is making decisions in that way. But we already know people come to us for that information. So
Sure.
Why not take advantage of it?
Sure.
What we're hearing a lot from a lot of the client or guests that we bring on the podcast, Carolyn, is, and it doesn't matter what industry you're talking, but in particular, we've had some folks from, who serve in various marketing director roles or even on the ad agency side, but we're hearing more and more clients want speed, creativity. And when you were saying, I think I wrote it down. We're small but very nimble, very good, very crafty. You gotta move quick, and you better be really creative, regardless of what your discipline or service or deliverable might be. It's a necessity. It's expected now.
It absolutely is. And the other thing I think is everybody is trying to do more with less right now because of the way that the hiring situation is. And like every team is smaller, right? So we've also tried to position ourselves as an extension of our clients' teams. Like I realize that you probably have 5 to 10 positions that are open, and maybe you're doing twice the amount of work that you were before while you're trying to hire on positions. And like how can we help fill that hole for you in the meantime? And hopefully hopefully that pays off in the future. But that is one of the ways that I think we are able to work on. The other thing is if we have a client meeting with somebody, we're going to discuss that even as an editorial team. The editorial and sales are going to come together, and we're going to say, okay, here are the goals for this client. Like how can we be a resource to them and come up with something that's going to move the dial for them and still move the dial for OnMilwaukee? And so I would say we're selective in really who we're trying to go after in partnering with. And I don't want to put up content just to have content. I want that to be something that people will resonate with.
Carolyn, give us an understanding of like a typical, let's go like a typical day or maybe a typical week, right? How do you divide your time? How would you I knew you talked a little bit about the Monday meeting and kind of deciding that, which I'm sure you've got your thumbprints all over that one. But beyond that, what else are you doing?
Sure.
Give the audience a look at that.
Every Monday, we plan out somewhat editorial for the week, right? And then we also are planning out different client partnerships that we need to work on. Maybe we need to, figure out, okay, here are the things that we need to check off for this client this week. Every morning, I'm generally doing a check-in on where is content, when do we think certain things will go, so that you can flux if you think you're going to have a story at 3, but this person didn't get back to you. Okay, you're going to move things down. The other parts of my day are spent in client meetings with different perspectives or prospective clients, and then putting together content plans for such clients. And then the other side is in client meetings with people that are interested in the programmatic side that we do, or what we call audience extension. So I would say every day it's pretty varied, but I would say it's probably around 60% that is like associated with clients, and then probably 40% that is like making sure that all the content that we already had planned out is happening, and then building out social campaigns and working with different partners and figuring out, okay, if we're gonna deploy an Instagram reel for a paid content client, let's figure out what that looks like and helping out concept what those things are.
You're dealing with a lot of clients. You're in a lot of meetings. Kurt and I are in a lot of meetings with clients as well. Carolynn, from your vantage point and what you're seeing, where do most clients get it wrong when it comes to content? Like when they're sitting down with you, where are they like, no, you're missing the bigger picture. Where's that blind spot for them?
I think the hard thing with client content is you have to find a happy medium between furthering a client goal and finding something that's still going to resonate with your audience. And I would say that's maybe that's where we are selective and where we are careful of, like, okay, can we write this in our own voice and use, our own assets to put that story together, and still have it be impactful for a client as well as for our readers? And what is that happy medium? I think that has allowed us to continue to grow that side of the business. And when I think about, like, when we launched what I still call it content solutions, offering a content partnership for somebody, I would say at any given point, at one point that was probably less than 20% of our business. And in fact, at one point, less than almost 80% of our business came from that programmatic audience extension side. And now I would say on any given month, 70 to 80% of that is coming directly back to OnMilwaukee. And that was really one of the goals that we had, of how do you kind of come back to a core product that most people look up to in the market and that they enjoy, and how do you actually make it fiscally work for a website or a media company like ourselves? And you have to have all those things play into it in order to continue to grow and keep the doors open. And I think we've tried to find ways that will still keep our readers happy, and because ultimately our readers are our first customer. They are the ones that are going to come on and engage with that content. They're the ones that are going to hopefully click through on a story if they see it on our Twitter feed or on our Facebook page. It does no good for anybody if you write a story that they're not going to resonate with, and then you have an upset client.
Yeah. I'd love to get your take in just this space overall, Carolynn, and like where are things headed? Where do you see just content going in the future, right? Look into your crystal ball and say, 5 years from now, it could be a very, very different landscape, not only for OnMilwaukee.
Yeah, for everybody.
Yeah. What do you see things happening and going?
I think media is very fragmented now. Some of that comes from social playing such a big part of the conversation of how people end up on your content.
Sure.
That also is, again, decided by an algorithm that you may or may not do well in.
Yep.
So you have to find a balance between things that are going to always feed into your website via SEO, via social. And then I think most media companies are going to find ways to continue to build out, another way for them to make revenue. For us, we looked at that and said, hey, we can do that in events. We can do that in social support for people. and in continuing to add those opportunities. We do have a podcast as well called Food Crush that is run by Lori, Frederick, and Matt on our team. And that's continued to grow as well. But now almost everybody has a podcast. And so how do you stick out? And so there's two ways, I guess, that you could position that. You could say, well, we have this really great niche audience. And honestly, I believe that they have a very great niche audience, but there are also some things that are going to be a little bit bigger. You're going to bring in you're going to have a national topic so that you can go beyond, the Milwaukee one. And I think you'll start to see that people are also going to look for opportunities to help each other. We also partner with other local media. We have a partnership with 88.9. We have a partnership with Black MKE. We run Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service articles on Milwaukee. Number one, because we believe those are important topics still that people should be exposed to. We also want to help other voices be heard in Milwaukee. And even though we don't cover it ourselves, that does not mean that we're not going to share it from somebody else. And then continuing to add on to different topics that are going to continue to grow your audience, and then figuring out how to monetize that audience. And that is really hard because I don't want a non-Milwaukee reader to be like, you're trying to figure out how to make money from us. Well, everybody's trying to figure out how to make money on everything right now in media. It's just a really hard game. The other thing we are launching is a premium membership. So that is another extension of how can you bring in some revenue. We're not going to take away anything that OnMilwaukee readers already get. They come to us because they want to hear about where they should go get a fish fry and what corner tap they should go to. So we're not going to take away any of those things, and I don't want to go behind a paywall. We're going to add on other things, and we're going to say, hey, what if we gave you early access to tickets on sale for our events, and you could buy VIP before anybody else does? Or what if we launch a new video series called Story Behind the Story, and we have on whatever writer wrote that story, and they're actually telling you things that maybe didn't make it into that story and showing you photos or video that didn't make it into that final cut. And then some of them will be like a urban splunking email. Let's figure out, urban splunking is one of OnMilwaukee's best brands. Can we add on to that and make that a part of a premium membership? And you're still looking at something well over $100 for a year to invest and be a part of that community. We're going to have social be a part of that as well. And you'll get into a special Facebook group or a special Instagram account that's private, and you only get to see those tidbits that we're putting there if you are a member. So hopefully our readers and people that enjoy OnMilwaukee every day understand we're trying to find unique ways to continue to be able to grow OnMilwaukee. And we think that, a membership like that makes a lot more sense than taking away something that they already come to us for. But let's give them something else.
As you look ahead, and you were saying we're all trying to figure out ways to make money, but obviously doing it in a meaningful way. That makes sense for the company as well as our clients. I think about OnMilwaukee, and I'm going to go back to what I was saying I had asked earlier. I think about creative, community, connected, and I think about what's the next step. Are there possibilities for an OnMilwaukee to say, you know what are some other models? What are some other templates that fit like a Milwaukee, but say it's not Milwaukee, say it's here, but the DNA or the idea of it, so there's a lot of parallels. Sure. We do this really well. Can we do this well over here too? Because there isn't this offering. I'm just kind of curious, and I don't know what it looks like out there. I don't know if you'd say, Pittsburgh, or I don't know. You would know better than I do, but talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, great question.
Sure. We've definitely talked about it. And in full disclosure, we probably already own some of those websites. We probably already own an on Cleveland or an on Denver, in the hopes that someday we can take this show on the road. But I think one of the ways that we've tried to do it instead of building out a whole new website is, can we consult with other companies that maybe are trying to make great content in those markets and try and teach them the secret sauce about community and connection and creativity. And I do think it's somewhat hard to remember that every day when you have, a number of different content pieces and you're trying to keep up with what's happening in real time. I think it's really hard to remember that ultimately it still is about like that community connection. And I think that there are ways that we can help people maybe beyond like launching it on Denver, although I'm not adverse if I had to go to Denver on a regular basis. That would be okay. That would be okay with me. But, maybe consulting with other companies that are looking for ways of how do we actually learn to write content that is going to resonate with people. And I don't mean it. I mean, you'll even see, other entities in town, or if you watch other markets as well, of kind of that same tone, right? Talking to people in a voice and as a resource versus telling people things. And I think that's maybe that's why people continue to come to us all the time. And honestly, I don't take any of those things as a negative, because I look at it as, hopefully they can continue to grow their audience, and rising tides does lift all boats. So if somebody else down the street is doing, if they're growing their audience, maybe there's ways for us to help each other.
Carolynn, you talked about a lot of cool things, and the picture that you paint looks very, very promising. A lot of cool things happening.
Exciting.
I really admire you mentioned about like keeping your voice and being authentic on one hand, but on the other hand, trying to be innovative. And that's a very fine line to walk. And you guys seem to be doing a very good job of that. So congratulations on that. But talk to us a little bit about, again, looking at your crystal ball, what are some of the potential red flags, potential speed bumps that are, maybe up ahead that keep you up at night?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting people to still click through. And how do you, if they don't, because the reality is now every Instagram post that you see or every Facebook post that you see, that could be construed as news, right? And so I would say all of these things are now pieces of content, and everybody is somewhat putting out their own content onto different platforms. And so like, how do you continue to get people to engage with your content, whether that means it's on Milwaukee, or maybe it means they're watching an Instagram reel that we did about a new pizza place that opened at Zocalo. I think all of those things are different pieces of content, and it's not always going to come down to, the traffic on Milwaukee. And I think the other thing is I had dinner earlier this week with one of the directors at Milwaukee Radio Alliance. And honestly, she was like, we should have a discussion about EFTs. And honestly, I know nothing about EFTs. They are like the digital photos that you can, digital. Yeah. See, I don't even know how to like adequately explain this. And then the next day you see a headline that says, well, Sprecher, who I was drinking today, is investing in EFTs. And I think it's things like that you either you want to be at the forefront of it, or at least you want to be able to do it better than somebody else is doing, so that people can continue to come to you as a resource. The other red flags, I think, is just anybody can launch a Medium account, and anybody now has a blog. Everybody has a podcast, and I don't mean that in a bad thing. I just think there's sorry, that's my Siri talking to me. Siri, no. How do you continue to add things that are going to get people to engage with your brand? In my crystal ball, I will say, I think events will continue to be something that media pushes themselves into. I think we're able to do that in a really good way at OnMilwaukee. I think that they're also going to be looking for, different add-ons to their business, whether it is, maybe you buy another ad agency so that you can put out, more ads for clients, or maybe you invest in a multimedia journalist so that you can put out a different type of content and stand out in a different way than you did before.
Carolynn Buser, Chief Content Officer, Chief Operating Officer for OnMilwaukee, a iconic brand here in the city. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. You have the final word. Where do people find out more about you, about OnMilwaukee? The mic is yours. You pimp it out however you want.
For sure. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It was an honor. You can find OnMilwaukee every day at onmilwaukee.com. Please follow us on our different social platforms. We are on all of them. You can find me on LinkedIn, or honestly, most of the time you can also find me in DMs of our social media because I do spend the time to go in there. I do believe that you are connecting with the person and not just a brand. And so we'll continue to have all of our writers as well be a part of that. And we hope that you want to be a part of the really cool, fun things in Milwaukee and help everybody grow together. We hope we see you at an event this summer. And you want to know what, if there's something you want us to write about, please drop me a line. Please know it is an open door.
Works for me.
Carolynn, thank you so much for your time. Kurt, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Carolynn. It was a pleasure.
Yeah,
Cheers.
thank you, Kurt. Cheers.